Hello, my friends. Do you remember The Sopranos?
Are you in the mafia?
Am I in a what?
I remember The Sopranos. The Sopranos was a great show, and probably more than any other, fiction, it's something I draw on a lot for vampire tabletop games. If you were gonna look at one piece of media to sort of draw in how do I run a Vampire the Masquerade game, I wouldn't recommend any Vampire the Masquerade fiction. I wouldn't even recommend any vampire fiction or even any horror fiction. I would recommend that you go and watch The Sopranos, because everything you need to know about how to run a vampire game is there in The Sopranos. You have the secret society there within the real world, but still completely isolated from the real world. You have that tiered power structure with the elders at the top, where all the money rolls up and all the shit rolls down. You have the violence, you have the codes of honor, but the most important thing about The Sopranos, the most important thing you learn from that show, is about the pettiness. At the end of the day, what matters most in The Sopranos isn't who had who killed or who is making more money off of some gambling operation. It's, is Feach laughing at Tony's jokes, right? Did Janice steal Carmela's ziti and pass it off as her own? Is it appropriate for a mafia boss to wear shorts?
John said he went to a cookout at your house.
Yeah.
Don doesn't wear shorts.
All right, come on. Elevators here.
There's an entire plot line in The Sopranos that goes through multiple episodes. Several people nearly get killed. It almost sparks a giant war between New York and New Jersey. And the entire thing is not motivated by money. It's not motivated by death. It's entirely motivated by the fact that Ralphie made a joke about how Johnny Sack's wife was fat.
I'll crack him good. I'll ask for 200 grand.
200 grand for insulting my wife. What's next, Carmine? You get the fucker for $1 million?
He wants to fuck her?
I'm making a point. I'm talking about my wife's honor here. My honor.
That's what really drives it all, right? More than the politics or the crime or even the psychological drama. It's the little, interpersonal insults and little imagined slights that power the entire plot. So I take a lot of stuff from The Sopranos thematically, but also sometimes in terms of very specific things. And one of those was the garbage war. Right at the beginning of The Sopranos, I think it's in the first episode, there's this conflict going on between the Sopranos, or the DeMeo crime family, which is who the Sopranos are part of in the deep lore of The Sopranos. And these, I don't think they're ever named, but these Czechoslovakian gangsters who've recently come to New Jersey, and they're feuding over who controls these garbage routes. Christopher, who is very much the player character of The Sopranos, right? Doesn't really understand the rules. He's very enthusiastic about being a gangster, but kind of more from a stylistic point of view. He also might decide at any point to just sort of drop it and go do something else. He's never fully paying attention, often jumps to bizarre conclusions and, elevates things to violence when it's totally unnecessary. And much like the way that NPCs often have to talk to player characters, the older gangsters often have to explain to Christopher in this sort of sad, tired way how, just immediately assassinating that guy was probably not the smartest move.
Louis Brazzi sleeps with the fishes.
Luca Brasi. Luca.
Whatever.
There's differences, Christopher, okay? From the Luca Brasi situation in this?
In the Rome game, you have a similar situation between two factions that are feuding over garbage collection. Control of the Guild of Garbage Collectors, which I'm just going to assume for thematic purposes is a real thing that existed in ancient Rome. These two factions are led by Carpos, who is a Toreador, and Vestasia, who is a Nosferatu. The Aventine is these two hills. There's the Upper Aventine and then the Lower Aventine, which is the lower hill. And the players are given control of the Lower Aventine. Carpos lives up here on the Upper Aventine. He really wants to take their territory, and he's tried to kill off whoever controlled that territory before a couple of times without much success. Carpos and Vestasia are involved in a gang war over control of garbage. And unfortunately for the player characters, the area right between Karpos and Vestasia is full of their territory. So their territory ends up being where this war takes place. There are several different steps along the way of this, of them hearing about like people fighting. They'll hear like, oh, there was some firebombing out in the street someplace, and they'll go try and investigate it and not be entirely sure what happened. A couple of times they hear that like garbage collectors are being attacked or gangs are fighting in the streets, and they're new, and so they're still struggling to even figure out exactly who the fuck lives in their territory. So they're not really clear on what's going on at first. And then this really escalates. There is a different story in The Sopranos, which I then also stole and put into this, having to do with a guy being assassinated in a restaurant, because the player characters now run a restaurant, the Walrus. In The Sopranos, Junior wants to kill his old rival, Big Pussy Malanga, not to be confused with Big Pussy Bompensero, who is a different gangster. Pussy Malanga is going to go to this restaurant called Vesuvio's, and they're going to shoot him there. But this will, of course, ruin the business of Vesuvio's, because no one will want to go to that restaurant after some guy gets, shot and head goes exploding all over the spaghetti. In the game, what ends up happening is Karpos asks them for permission to assassinate a guy who's staying in their territory, I think is what happened. They don't know who the guy is, so they're like, okay, sure. That's fine. He doesn't mention that he's going to do it in public in their restaurant. And then he sends his sidekick, who is a Banu Hakim, who just walks up to this guy in the middle of the restaurant and just blows him up. So if you thought it was going to be bad for business, if someone's sitting there eating their spaghetti and somebody walks up and shoots them in the back of the head, imagine someone sitting there eating their spaghetti and somebody touches them and their entire body just ruptures like in Scanners. The players are a little bit pissed off. They even go and talk to various other older vampires. They talk to the Gohar sisters. They talk, I can't remember who else they talk to, asking about what they should do. And they're told, like, if you want to kill Karpos, it's probably fine. Nobody really likes Karpos. However, his bodyguard, Kura, is a Banu Hakim. And you're probably not going to be able to kill Karpos without killing his bodyguard. So they're like, okay, well, that could be a problem. A different vampire asks the players to go find a book that some Barnes & Noble ordered this book for her from, some spooky library someplace, and it hasn't arrived. So they go looking, and they find some dead people. The shop owner is dead. His assistant is missing. The book is missing. And they're trying to figure out what happened to it. They also run into the Nosferatu, who are looking for this book as well. The assistant to the bookseller had opened this book and tried to translate it. And unfortunately, there's a demon in the book, as will happen. And so he gets possessed by the demon and is trying to not go crazy. But, he goes a little crazy. And he starts hurling demon spells, which kills his employer and causes him to flee. And then eventually, when he's captured by the Nosferatu, they drag him back to their restaurant. They try to, torture him or interrogate him. And the result of that is that he starts throwing demon spells again. And when the players arrive, they find one of the Nosferatu, I think, and just a bunch of patrons in the restaurant have been turned to stone, which alarms them. The Nosferatu assume, incorrectly, that Karpos is responsible for this, and this escalates the war with them even more. And so now they're throwing firebombs around in the player character territory, trying to take out this Karpos guy's garbage people. And the player character's like, this is just fucking out of hand. Let's do? Let's negotiate a truce. Let's collect everybody together. And they go and they meet with these people individually. What happens, which is often funny, is the players go and talk to two different parties to try and, act as a go-between. And when they go talk to the Nosferatu, they roll really well on their persuasion and really well on their empathy checks. They convince the Nosferatu to come to the meeting, and they believe that they're really going to do it. When they go talk to Karpos, the opposite happens. They fail to convince him of anything, and they fail to realize that they haven't convinced him of anything. And so they end up accidentally luring the leader of the Nosferatu out to their restaurant. Karpos is supposed to show up, but he doesn't. He sends his chilled, Tanis, this other Toreador, who shows up, and along with her comes the invisible Banu Hakim, who quickly scanners the Nosferatu. This Banu Hakim is a much higher level than the player characters, and they don't really want to kill him anyway because they're worried that if they kill him, the other Banu Hakim might come after them. And so it's very one-sided. He basically just murks all the Nosferatu, and then the Toreador run off giggling like, hee, and the Banu Hakim just leaves, and the players have now another mess. I had expected the players eventually to just be like, fuck it, and rock up to this guy's house, kick in the door, and just start a big fight. Surprisingly, they didn't do that. I think just because they were so new, and they were so intimidated by this Banu Hakim, they're like, we can't fight him directly. We have to do something sneaky. We have to be smart, which is not necessarily our strong point. So they go and talk to Phaedra, the Setite. She's not willing to do anything, but she is willing to sell them information. She says that she will sell them some information that would really fuck over Karpos if they were to make it public. But, it's going to be expensive. This information is, she tells them there's a group of bandits, these thieves out in this house somewhere who have stolen something or something. Like, if you go capture them, there's valuable information there that will get Karpos in trouble, but you'd have to capture them alive. So they go up there and run into what they are expecting to be humans, but it turns out to actually be a group of vampires, a group of very young Banu Hakim, and have a really brutal fight. I think like 2 or 3 of the players got knocked out in this fight. It was nasty. They almost got killed, but they do manage to win, bring the Banu Hakim down, stake a couple of them. Once they've staked them, they can taste their blood and be like, oh shit, these are Banu Hakim. And they manage to piece together that these Banu Hakim were created illegally. So the Banu Hakim, if you don't know, are like this super serious cult. They're really, really particular about a lot of things, more so than most vampire clans. They have very specific rules, one of which is that they only create new Banu Hakim after they go through a really rigorous, many years long process. So you're not allowed to just go create new ones. Karfa, was I saying his name is Kura? It's Karfa. Karfa, the Banu Hakim, he is, he's in a bad state. He's been bloodbound to this crazy Toreador. He's stuck following his orders. And of the many things that the Toreador has forced him to do, which have violated his oaths and codes and beliefs, one of them is he's forced him to sire a bunch of younger Banu Hakim to use as shock troops. And so the players decide to take this information to Bomilcar, the head of the Banu Hakim in Rome. I believe this was the first time they'd ever seen Bomilcar. They had heard about him a few times, they'd been warned about him, and they were pretty afraid of him. But they decide to, hike up their big boy pants and go talk to him and present him with these bodies to show him that his other friend has been doing some things he was not supposed to be doing. Bomilcar tells them to go home, stay inside, and just wait. And the players, they go back to their house and they pretty much pack their bags and they just kind of sit there like, where are we going to go? What happens if we have to flee Rome? Is that the end of the campaign? Does this become Alexandria by night? Where do we go after that? Until eventually Bomilcar shows up. He tells them that the situation's been resolved. Karpos and Karfa will not bother them anymore. He does not explain any further what has happened. But they're like, okay, cool beans. When they go to Karpos's house, where they've been before to visit him, they find no sign of him. He's gone, and Karfa's gone, and neither of them are ever seen again. The players assume, and they're correct in assuming, that the Banu Hakim just walked in and killed these guys. Or at least they killed Karpos. Karfa would probably have been dragged back to the Eagle's Nest for punishment. The punishment being death, of course. But they never really know what happened. But they do find that Tanis, the other Toreador, is still there. She has been knocked unconscious and tied up, staked and tied up. They also find Panther is there, who is one of Phaedra's lackeys, and Phaedra's ghoul, Zero, is there. For some reason that to this day is kind of confusing, one of them decides to sneak through the house, sneak up behind Panther and be like, hey, what's up? And tap him on the shoulder. And so I had him roll a frenzy check for being startled, and he failed horribly. And so he flies into a frenzy. They spend the next several rounds, struggling to fight this guy, trying to stake him. They do knock him out, finally, and they tell Zero, go tell your master to fuck off. Like, we're taking everything. This is all our shit now. And Zero's like, well, the Senate said it was our house. They're like, well, and so then they're like, well, we're taking all the treasure. And Zero's like, well, there is no treasure. Phaedra already took it. And they're like, well, and they like look around and they see the Toreador, like, we're taking that Toreador. Yeah. And it's like in The Jerk, right? Where he's like, I'm just taking this lamp. Like, we're taking that Toreador, and that's all we need.
This lamp. The ashtray. The spell game. And the remote control. And the lamp, and that's all I need.
This comes to the sad irony and the sad fate of Tanis, and connected to that, the sad fate of Karfa, and another character who was not mentioned, but who I'll mention here because I don't think he'll ever come up, Girish. What happens to Tanis is Cassandra decides, I need like a door dasher, right? So she blood bonds Tanis, and she's like, good news, Tanis, we're not going to murder you. Bad news, you're now my slave. So if you don't want us to kill you, you have to drink my blood, become mind-controlled to me, and then, because I'm a Nagaraja and have to eat people's organs every day, your job is going to be to go out every night for the rest of time, lure an innocent person back to my house, murder them, or more specifically, tie them down to a chair so I can murder them, and then, spend the next couple of days trying to keep them alive as I show up every night to eat some of their body parts. Keep them alive as long as possible until eventually you have to, dispose of the corpse. That's your life now. So Tanis and Karfa are both enslaved to their master against their will, and it ends up destroying both of them. Karfa begins life as this honorable warrior, right? He's like a vampire paladin. He travels the world hunting evil. And what ends up happening to him is he gets mind-controlled by this sadistic guy who then forces him to violate everything he's ever believed in and to spend years just disgracing his own legacy. And ultimately, when he gets found out, his own brothers come and execute him for what he's done. A similar thing happens to Tanis. He was like this young Greek woman from a wealthy family. She's a mathematical genius. When she was very young, she runs into Karpos, who's already a vampire. He recognizes how intelligent she is, so he turns her into a vampire. He blood bonds her and uses her basically to run his business, to do his books. So she's this wealthy young woman with all this promise and all this potential who gets turned into a slave for a gangster. She's a mathematical genius who could probably do all kinds of amazing things, who instead is just limited to running the accounts for a criminal organization. And then, as if that isn't bad enough, when he's destroyed, she gets taken over by Cassandra, who then also enslaves her and turns her into a serial killer. And she has to spend decades murdering people when she does not want to. And the way that she finally ends up dying is defending Cassandra. Years later, decades after this happens, when Cassandra has moved up the ranks of the Effers, there's a situation that happens with Phaedra where Phaedra, it's not important the details, but Phaedra pisses off the Senate, and the Senate is going to punish her, and they're like, slap on the wrist. You're a retainer guy, Girish, that Ravnos who follows you around everywhere. He's dead. We choose to execute him as punishment for your stupidity. And so they send Cassandra to kill him. They give her a written execution for this guy and send her to kill him. She shows up, and Cassandra doesn't like Phaedra. None of the players like Phaedra. For some reason, they don't like the evil blood sorcerer. I don't know why. Phaedra, tries multiple times to talk Cassandra out of this, to, negotiate, to offer her other things, to come up with options for how she can not kill Girish. But Cassandra is, unmoved. She's like, absolutely not. He's dead. Hand him over. And finally, Phaedra is like, okay. She calls Girish in, and she tells him, go with Cassandra. She needs your help with something. Just go with her and do whatever she says, and then come back when you're done. And none the wiser, he follows Cassandra. She leads him off to the murder house and then ambushes him and tries to kill him. The fight, unfortunately, goes against Cassandra for a minute. She thinks that she can easily overpower the guy, but he turns out to be stronger than she expected. And so Tanis, who is there at the murder house, jumps in. She's compelled to jump in to try and save Cassandra. Girish turns on her and kills her. And then as he is killing her, Cassandra diablerizes Girish. Girish, another guy who originally was a nice person, right? Not someone who was really evil or harmful, just a wanderer exploring the world, who ran across Phaedra and got mind controlled, and then spent the next couple hundred years being forced to be her bodyguard and her slave and go around killing people, maiming people, spying on people, whatever she told him to do. So Vampire and The Sopranos is about pettiness and personal hoarder. It's about little vindictive desires to enact tiny bits of revenge for stupid bullshit on other people. And it's about people who are being trapped in this, eternal punishment, suffering endlessly, sometimes because of things that they did, but usually just because it has been their fate to suffer. And that's what ended up happening to both Tanis and Girish. After, decades enslaved to these horrible masters, they die fighting each other for no real reason, just suffering for the crimes of their victimizers. And on that delightful note, that is the story of the Garbage War. So, that's all I have. I hope that was entertaining.
This whole war could have been averted. Cunnilingus and psychiatry brought us to this.